Well, welcome to the Energizing America podcast, where we talk all things energy while leading in our business, community, and life.
I really wanted to, Ryan, I don't know, when did we do our first podcast? I meant to go check.
Oh yeah, a few years back when I was building Better in Our Backyard during COVID, um, I started randomly cold calling a bunch of companies, and you're one of them. And we did that podcast, and we just talked about the projects that we were supporting at that time, and we made some clips on it. And that was
Must have been if it
4 or
was during
5 years
COVID
ago.
2020
Yeah.
time. And so since then, Better in Our Backyard has grown not just from a Twin Ports or like a regional thing, but now we're seeing you all over the place. So I'd love to talk a little bit, specifically Twin Ports. How is mining and what's the outlook like, and what are you hearing on the streets there? And then separately, what caused us to go from the Twin Ports, Better in Our Backyard, into this national kind of movement, and now even with the upcoming expo in October, and hit on some of those highlights. So let's start with just the Twin Ports here and talk a little bit about the mining industry and where we're at in the Twin Ports. One, several of our listeners have never had the privilege of meeting you in person and seeing your activism, if you will, or your work in the mining industry. So remind us, what got you going in this work to begin with? Why did you go to Better? Why did you start this organization?
That's a great question. So I previously worked for your competitor, Parsons Electric,
Yep.
and then now Archkey Technologies. And I mainly grew up in northwestern Minnesota, or I was born in northwestern Minnesota. I mainly grew up in southern Minnesota, went to college at the University of North Dakota, and I worked construction during the summer and warehousing during the winter while I was going to school. And every year we would get not every year, but there was one year where we got a random $2 an hour raise. I used to work at the Coca-Cola warehouse, and in Grand Forks, and I went to my boss and I asked him, "Why did you give us a raise?" And he said, "Well, we're starting to lose a lot of our drivers and a lot of our warehouse people to Williston out in the oil fields, because that was towards the tail end of, there was still a boom in the oil industry where it was pretty lucrative for truck drivers, where they could triple their hourly wage by just heading 5 hours west." And so that really gave me a clear kind of personal education on economics and what good paying jobs do to drive local economies, whether they're nearby or even far away. And I've always loved Duluth, and so I moved out to Duluth. I have some long distance relatives here, and I had maybe a few friends from high school here, but I didn't really know too many people. I just knew I wanted to come out here. And so midway through UND, I moved out here, and I didn't realize how bad the job market was here at the time. And so I worked bussing tables, and then when they weren't giving me enough hours, I started literally knocking on doors, calling companies to see if I can get a job, because I was taking a semester off, but I needed some kind of, cash to live. And one of the companies I called was Parsons Electric, and I interviewed for a warehouse job. I walked out with a project management internship, and I started learning about the mining industry and then the politics in Duluth, and seeing how a lot of the politicians were going against the mining industry. I thought about my experience at UND, where it's like, well, some of these people might not realize it, or citizens in Duluth or in the Twin Ports, but without the iron mining industry, Duluth would struggle, and Superior would struggle immensely. The Wescoms of the world or the Archkey Technologies of the world might close up shop and just focus on different parts of the country or different parts of the state instead of this area. And I don't think people understood the ripple effects. So I just got passionate really quick. I ran for city council, lost, and then I moved down to Tulsa for about 6 months, and then I always knew about Better in Our Backyard. A lot of people think I founded it. A lot of the stuff that you see was stuff that I came up with, but I knew about Better in Our Backyard, and once they had enough seed funding, then they offered me a position. I don't think they really thought I was going to take it, because I had a good opportunity at Parsons, and it's a great company. But I knew I wanted to make a change and try something that I was really, really passionate about. And so I was working on a data center in Tulsa, helping project manage that, and then I moved back to Duluth to run Better in Our Backyard. And then the first year that I ran it, we were supposed to just be on, targeting young professionals and college students, and we're trying to change, opinions on college campuses, or try to be an answer to like Duluth for Clean Water that's looking to stop New Range Copper Nichols North Met project. And after my first year, as much as I knew that type of advocacy was important, I didn't think it was sustainable for the association. It was hard for me to make a good value proposition to potential new members, because at the time we just had 3 members. We had 3 founding members, and which was Twin Metals, and then Enbridge, and Polymet, and even Lakehead Constructors was with us at the beginning with seed funding. And as I'm kind of like thinking through these things, we started messing around with social media a little bit, and then COVID hit, and then from during COVID, I kind of asked myself, okay, if I were all these other associations that have been around for 30 years, how would I reinvent myself today? And it would be doing the things that I was already kind of thinking about and slowly practicing and doing. And so I just taught myself how to graphic design, do video edits, call you to do videos without asking for like any money. I was just trying to, how do we get our name out there? How do we build that brand? How do we, let people know about our mission? And then by the time we got through COVID, the Line 3 replacement project was finished with Enbridge. We were helping advocate for that project. And they needed help also with Line 5 advocacy efforts in Michigan and Wisconsin. And so I'm giving you a lot of info right here, but so let me know if you need me to stop or.
No, it's awesome.
So when things were switching with Line 5, I noticed that their talking points were basically the same as the Line 3 replacement project. So Enbridge is trying to permit the Great Lakes Tunnel project in the UP of Michigan, because Line 5 runs from Superior, Wisconsin all the way to Ontario. And when it hits the Great Lakes, it goes through the UP of Michigan and then goes down the Lower Peninsula, but it has to go through the states of Mackinac. So it basically turns into one huge pipe to two small pipes, and it basically lays on the lake bed of Michigan. And they're trying to basically bore a hole underneath the lake bed of Lake Michigan so that those pipes are safely underground, so it's not, vulnerable to anchor strikes. And I saw just very similarities, and including the Michigan politics are very similar to Minnesota's. And I knew that I could take Better in Our Backyard national, and I felt that this was our first step. So I changed up our logo, and I put together a proposal with one of my board members at the time, and they decided to stay on with us. And then we changed up our logo. We used to have a Minnesota-centric logo, and then that kind of really started bringing things. And then, that was kind of our interview, if you will, of showing that we can deliver value, not just in Minnesota, but outside of Minnesota. And during that time period too, we grew from like 3 members to 60. And then a company called Perpetual Resources out of Stibnite in Idaho eventually joined us when they saw our logo changed. And because they had been talking with us previously, they liked how we did things. They're asking us for ideas on messaging and vice versa. And yeah, and then fast forward today, we picked up Resolution Copper a little over a year ago out of Arizona. And that was very similar too, where, the talking points for Twin Metals and New Range Copper Nickel and why we need copper in the U.S. And unfortunately, under the previous administration, they were really, going against those 2 projects. Well, they're also going against copper projects in Arizona and Alaska. And so all these talking points are the same. And I saw a lot of synergies. And, with our style of messaging, it was really applicable to companies across the country. And so fast forward today, we're representing now 17 projects in 10 different states.
It's
and we
really
have over
awesome.
130 members.
There's so much there to unpack. Like, one, taking a single message and making it a global message, if you will, right? Like, the economic impact of doing something in our own backyard responsibly and well can be felt by every single community across the United States of America. And most of us have our head buried because we're so well taken care of, we don't even realize where the natural resources come from. Mm-hmm. We just don't even realize it.
Including me before I started at Parsons.
Absolutely.
I had no clue.
Ryan, before I got involved in Wescom, I didn't care about oil and gas. Like our chief people officer often says, a person in Lakeside just turns on their fireplace or turns their heat up or turns it down. We don't, and it just works, right? We turn on our water, it comes out, we love it. But we don't stop and ponder where it came from or how. And that same exact thing is felt across the U.S. And then behind that same thing of being able to dial that in or, turn your furnace up or down, there's somebody behind it making a living doing that.
Yeah.
And if we don't do it here, they're going to do it somewhere because we all love to turn our furnace up and down. That's a common value everyone has. So until we decide to stop living in a first world country, which I don't think is going to happen, we need these natural resources. And we better just do it in our backyard where it's the best done. So there's so much to unpack on how you took that message from the Twin Ports and made it regional.
Yeah.
I think that's a phenomenal story. What were you doing at UND? What was your college degree gonna be?
Business management.
Okay.
And I technically never finished, so
Yeah,
but I
but
don't usually admit it. But yeah.
well, who cares if you finished? You're doing some important work
Yeah.
in advocacy, which is so in today's noisy world, keeping a message simple and getting it out to the most people is a very big task. And I know just from watching on the outside, what Better in Our Backyard has been able to accomplish is phenomenal. And I think there's a ton of gratitude in the community of the Twin Ports for what you've been able to do. Walk me through a little bit. You talked about COVID and the impact and the folks up on the Iron Range trying to get these resources out to market. What do you feel like your advocacy has moved that needle? Or do you have any stories of like where it was like, okay, this is worth it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much we've moved the needle, but I think we've moved how we've helped, because there's so many great influencers out there. There's the Keaton Turners at Turner Mining. There's the Aaron Witts at BuildWit. So I don't know if we've influenced too much policy change, but I think we've helped play a role in helping change how the mining industry, because I think the oil and gas has always been really good, a step ahead of the mining industry. Unfortunately, it's not a knock on the mining industry, but I think the mining industry has always struggled at talking about themselves and selling themselves in a good way. I think they've always tried to stay under the limelight. And so I think we're helping play a huge role on how does the mining industry talk about themselves. And we should be proud that, if North Met is permitted, that's 380 jobs. We should be proud that, Keytac and Mintac and Hibtac collectively between U.S. Steel and Cliffs is, providing thousands of jobs to the Iron Range. I mean, we should talk about that and not hold any shame in regards to that. I mean, the Iron Range is providing, the 85% of the iron ore needed for steelmaking in the U.S. That we produce in Minnesota. So, we should market that. We should talk about that each and every day. And so I think we've helped play a role in that. And on the policy end, I hope we're influencing it. I mean, I would say the biggest signs that I've been seeing behind the scenes of us influencing things is that this year specifically, especially with the change in administration last fall, or technically in January, it seems like once a month I'm getting some type of cold message on LinkedIn that I will think is like some insurance salesman or something. But it's a lobbyist in DC saying, hey, like I have a client in Idaho, or I have a client in Arizona, I have a client in Nevada that really could use you guys, because we love what you're doing at the Capitol. And I've had about 4 or 5 of those in just the last couple months.
That is really, really impactful.
And it's interesting too, because it's just because like long term, what I see for Better in Backyard, like from an entrepreneurial perspective, is the way that we do messaging, we can still be behind the scenes and seeing what is happening on the Capitol, whether it's in Minnesota or in DC, and then we can use whatever we can use publicly to message for the projects that we support. I mean, we can be complementary to what's going on behind the scenes between lobbying efforts and advocacy efforts, but it's been pretty fascinating seeing that.
Yeah. What is the response when you tell people, or when this messaging goes out? Do you feel like it's a surprise to people that 85% of the iron ore used in the U.S. for steelmaking is produced in northern Minnesota?
Yeah, I don't think. Well, it surprises me every time I read it. It's because I think the other 15 is in Michigan with Cliffs' Tilden mine, and but don't quote me on the 85%. I mean, I got to double check those numbers, but I think it's around there.
A large percentage.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. I mean, that's what's disappointing with some of this. And I'm not a geologist or scientist by trade, but or an engineer, but that's where it's a little disheartening that the MPCA is pushing the sulfite issue on U.S. Steel with their Keytac operations, because it could have a ripple effect potentially, where it's going to shut down the iron mines on the Iron Range and affect thousands of jobs. And then even just from a national security standpoint, if you're not making your own energy or your own steel in the U.S., you're as what you're saying earlier, you're not going to be a first world country. You have to, at a minimum, have steel making and oil and gas exploration in the U.S. if you want to have a first world country in today's modern world society.
And so far, I have yet to meet anybody in this great country of ours willing to dial back their energy consumption.
No,
we're willing to dial back somebody across the seas, but we're not willing to do it ourselves, and that's a shame. So and the shame is that we're trying to force other people to do it when we're not doing it. So let's just acknowledge we all really like living in a first world country, and we need these, and we plan to use these natural resources. So when we oftentimes we talk about the economic impact, which is so important, right? But there's like real world people behind this doing real world stuff, like literally a guy in a shovel pulling the iron ore out in northern Minnesota at midnight, putting it in a dump truck driven by some woman who's going home, and they're both trying to raise their family the next day, going to the local school. That's the real story. And by the way, they're taking this natural resource that we're then using. If we don't do it here, we still need that iron ore.
Yep.
So we're going to hire some other country. It's going to come across our Great Lakes, first the oceans, then into the Great Lakes, which do those shippers have the same environmental standards that we have at a minimum, even to go through those, through the oceans or in their own countries?
Well, either way, it's an added carbon footprint, even if they have good environmental.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
But we're still using the natural resource. It's just that now we're not doing it in our own backyard where we can control the process and have a better outcome. And oh, by the way, economically benefit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But first we get to control the process and have a good outcome. But as soon as it moves it from like controlling from a sense that how can we do this responsibly and economically, everyone can win, into an agenda, which is what we have oftentimes in capitals as an agenda. As soon as it moves from a desire to do the right thing into an agenda, it breaks. And that's where we've been for so many years, that we've moved from how can we safely, efficiently, and economically all benefit from pulling iron ore out of the Iron Range, getting it out to market, into these very siloed ideas of, oh, you might have some runoff into the boundary waters. You might have this issue. Well, yeah, all of those risks same exist. But I'll tell you one thing, I'd rather have the risk of us putting something into the boundary waters than having it overseas where they have zero idea of even what the word risk means.
Yeah.
And by the way, is that even a risk? I mean, walk me through what your clients are telling you when you're advocating and you're telling us that we don't have to worry about copper mining in northern Minnesota when it comes to the boundary waters. Is that actually true, or are you just getting paid to tell me that?
Well, I think if anything, the frustrations is that they're not even being allowed to prove that they can do it safely, like with Twin Metals. Like when their leases were taken away, they're not even allowed to go through the permitting process to prove to the agencies that they can mine copper, nickel, and non-ferrous metals safely. I think that's the biggest issue, or the frustration, I think, with many of my clients that want to push projects, or not push projects forward, but permit projects, especially in Minnesota. And I think part of it too is, there's a little bit of an agenda behind it, where I think many don't want to see Twin Metals prove that they can do it safely and responsibly.
But why? What do you suppose? Why don't they want to see that through?
I don't
Because
know.
that's just a platform that they're running on.
I don't know. I don't know if it's a resentment against the mining industry in general, because of historical mistakes from 100 years ago, 50 years ago. I really don't know. I think with some politicians, they know that it's going to affect many of their voting base if they go out of their way to support Twin, or anyone in the mining industry. There's some easy wins, especially in the taconite space, but that's a good question.
So we have to change the narrative from the voter. The voter needs to be educated as to this need for copper, right?
Well, and that was part of the original, and it still is the intent. I mean, that was the original intent of why we wanted to go to college campuses, because especially young people didn't have a very good opinion of mining, and still in many ways don't. But they're not seeing that, okay, if a Twin Metals or say a NorthMet project is a success, not only, it's going to help strengthen national security, because copper, nickel, and cobalt are all considered critical by the USGS now. So that's a national security issue, because if a mineral is considered critical, it means that we're not making enough of it in the U.S. and that our supply chain for that specific mineral is vulnerable. Like countries could basically, like China, for example, could say, we're going to stop giving or letting you have this metal, or exploring this metal to you, or selling this metal to you in the marketplace. And then also they're not thinking about the fact, though, too, that many of the renewable energy technologies that we want, or many of these politicians want, whether it's a new Tesla or a new EV, or like a wind turbine or a solar panel, requires a lot of copper, nickel, and cobalt, and a lot of the minerals that Twin and NorthMet want to mine. And then at the same token, though, too, on the supply chain side of it, economically, it's also going to create a lot of great paying jobs. I think the average mining wage in Minnesota pays in excess of $90,000 a year, if not more than six figures. And so it's going to create a huge positive economic impact to the region. So all these projects to me that I look at, plain and simple, is that they're being, whether it's a project in Montana or Minnesota, is that they're being held to the strongest environmental standards in the world. They're going to create great paying jobs. They're going to benefit the local economy immensely, with great paying jobs that have a lot of spin-off jobs where the Wescoms of the world are going to do very well in that environment. But also, more importantly, too, they're going to responsibly produce the minerals needed for states that are pushing for renewable energy, while also strengthening U.S. national security. And that's what I think people don't realize. One great example is the Stibnite project in Idaho. They recently just got their final federal permit from the U.S. Forest Service, which is a huge win. So this project is technically fully permitted, but it's been in the permitting process for over 10 years. And the reason why it's been in the permitting process for over 10 years is that it requires federal permitting. There's some projects in the U.S. that only require state and private permits, and then there's some projects that require federal and state and private. And Perpetua's Stibnite project is one of them. Well, the reason why they're getting permitted is that they're targeting a critical mineral called antimony. The U.S. has no domestic production of it in the U.S., and I think over 85 to 90% of it, either we get our antimony from either Russia, Tajikistan, I didn't pronounce that right, and China. And we need antimony for armor-piercing bullets. And the DoD has backed this project 4 different times, both under Biden and under the current administration. And even the Mineral Export Bank is also finalizing a $2 billion loan to help them build their mine, because it literally is a national security issue. And once this project is up and running, it's probably going to be quite literally an extension of the DoD, because their deposit alone holds enough antimony where they're going to be producing enough antimony a year where it's going to meet the DoD's demands alone. That's a huge national security issue. But in my opinion, that project should have been running 5 years ago. Like, it shouldn't have even gotten to a point where the DoD needs to help, bring this project forward.